Testing 1, 2. Testing 1, 2.
Oh,
All right, so we're good to go.
okay, good. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the Florida Town Planning and Zoning meeting of 11 September 2024 to order. Please rise and pledge allegiance to the flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag, of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, Noreen, could you please do the roll call?
Sure. Commissioner Claffey. Commissioner Fox. Commissioner Mines.
He's online.
Commissioner Mathis. Commissioner Cascarelli. Here. Chairman Sobieski.
Here.
Commissioner Woods.
Here.
Commissioner Rose.
Here.
Commissioner Wattman.
Here.
Commissioner Wakama.
I'd like to have Commissioner Hoffman seated for Commissioner Nafis and Commissioner Droz seated for Commissioner Fox. Okay, thank you. Approval of the agenda, Mr. Planner.
No changes.
Okay, thank you. All right, now we're into the public participation part. It's limited to 2 minutes. Or 3 minutes, whatever time rather, 3 minutes for people, for items not on the agenda. Again, not on the agenda. Anyone in the room here? All right.
Let's see if we have any attendees. No one has their hand raised online. If you are online and wish to speak, please raise your hand in the Zoom application. There's one attendee, but no hands raised.
No hands, okay, thank you.
Oh, a hand is raised.
Okay.
Hi, this is not for the public participation. I just wanted to mention that I am joining in from SBS Realty. When I joined earlier, it appeared as if my general contractor, who is Gary Dehurst, I joined as if it looked as if it's him. So I kind of left and rejoined. I don't know how it's appearing now, but this is Newington. I'm the owner of SBS Realty.
Okay, thank you. Mute, and then so get Mr. Dayharsh, was that person with you? Yes. Okay, good.
Yes.
Anyone else, Paul?
So I promoted them to a panelist and no one else. And just please keep yourself muted. And during that pre-app, if you would like to talk, Gary will provide the cue.
Thank you.
No one else.
All right, next is zoning officers report. Everybody has a copy of the zoning officers report. Is there any questions?
No.
No. Okay. Thank you. Remarks by commissioners and remarks by any of the commissioners. Okay. Public hearings, we have none. Approval of the minutes. I have a motion to approve the minutes. Motion approved. Is there a second? Second. All right, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Next is TP's regular meeting minutes. Should be all set with that, right, Paul?
Yep, just
Okay.
approved them again. That's a minute
Right.
of the 28th.
We don't need to approve them again, do we?
Nope.
Okay. New business. We're gonna have first is a pre-application discussion for 56 Costello Road, proposed text amendment to zoning parking regulations for indoor showrooms, retail sales, or retail stores, proposed service shops. Pre-application for 56 Costello Road. Please state your name and address for the record, please.
For the record, Brian Panico with Cole Civil and Survey, here with the applicant, Mr. Abernasfer, who,
Can you speak in a microphone a little
sorry.
louder, please? Thank you.
with the
Just slide
applicant, Mr. Abernasfer, who is the owner of the property.
Okay.
So this application for a text amendment initially came as we were looking at developing this site on Costello Road. This is the Ashley Furniture site. to try to see if there was an opportunity to put another pad site or better utilize the property itself. Currently, this was an old bowling alley. The parking lot that is there today is basically what was there when this was a bowling alley. They remodeled it to the furniture showroom. And currently, at best guess, we're estimating a maximum of probably somewhere around 30 to 40 parking spaces being used at peak at any given time. And that's for both the maximum number of employees that they would have, which is around 10 to 12 during their busiest kind of day of the year, which I believe is Black Friday. And with that being said, the underutilization of the parking lot just led them to look into what some other options were. Putting a pad site there for a restaurant, which I believe we supplied the kind of conceptual plan.
I have it up on the screen and it was included in the packet.
This would give some opportunity for the site to be a little more utilized. Clearly, there's still a large amount of parking on the site for the Ashley's Furniture Store, considering that the fast food use requires only 20 some odd spaces. But as we started going through the zoning regulations and looking at the requirements, what we found was the requirement for a furniture showroom, because it falls under retail, is 5 spaces per 1,000 square feet. This is a very large building. They basically just have a whole bunch of living rooms set up throughout the entire store. And so therefore the 40,000 plus square foot building requires 188 spaces or so. There is room on the site, on the back of the side of the site, and you can see in our concept to add what would be enough parking spaces to make up for a lot of that, the ones that would be lost due to the new use. However, it seems kind of counterproductive to put 40 some odd spaces in the back of the building just because we have to have them per the regulations, even though they would realistically never be used. And this also is counterproductive to the state's new water quality manual that says that we should be, and obviously the town regulations that say we should be reducing impervious surface, we should be creating more green space, we should be providing water quality and filtration, and trying to reduce our overall burden on the environment, and then also reduce our overall burden on the existing stormwater infrastructure of the town. So with all of that being said, we started to look at what some of the options were. In the very large packet of information that we've given you, we looked at 2 things. We looked at both overall retail trends, retail uses, what the parking demands have been. And then we looked at that over the course of a couple different generations of the International Transportation Engineers manuals for traffic. And what we found was that traffic and trip generation over the last 40 years or so has been steadily declining. Obviously, we can attribute probably a lot of that to the advent of online shopping and delivery services and things like that. Just not the same amount of people physically driving to the store to pick up things every single day as there may have been 40 years ago. And so then we also looked at parking generation manual, which is also produced by the International Transportation Engineers, and they, or the Institute of Transportation Engineers, I'm sorry. And that also shows a general decline. What we included in this packet was specific to furniture showrooms, as there isn't a line item currently in the regulations under the parking table for such a space, whether it be furniture showroom or basically any like indoor showroom where sales of some nature occur. So that could be furniture, it could be vehicles, it could be anything generally that is but the type of place, not like a big box store, that doesn't kind of fall into those categories, or the general categories that we look at when we start to tabulate what parking requirements should be. So again, we focused on the showrooms and specifically the furniture showrooms, just as a measure to look at if we were to add another line item into the parking table for such a category, what would those numbers need to be? And basically in this packet, we just summarize all of our findings, and the reality of the situation was that we found that realistically 30 to 50 spaces for a 40,000 square foot building is adequate. Obviously, the concern was brought up that, well, if these places then go to change of use, what would we do for parking? And I think that our general kind of thought process and discussion with the town is that, the big box stores, the retail stores, the Home Depots, the Walmarts, the grocery stores, the infrastructure is already in town for those buildings. I'd be shocked if Home Depot decided to abandon the building that they currently have and go build a new one down the street. It just economically makes absolutely no sense for them to do such a thing. So that will likely never happen. And most of the very large big box stores in general, there are even spaces available for other tenants to come into those, because a lot of these places are closing because of the advent of online and the reduction in sales. So it's our belief that realistically, the smaller stores, 10,000 square feet and under though the opportunity is still there for businesses to come in, and they will likely still continue to come in. And so if we were to look at the retail kind of parking table overall and say, okay, well, if we adjust this, instead of saying 5 spaces for the first 10,000 and then 4.5 spaces for 10 to, and we make some adjustments there, that might be a better option, because we can then leave that 0 to 10,000 square feet at the current 5, which would generate a lot and create a lot of parking for those types of businesses. But then as we get to these larger buildings, maybe reduce that just to try to reduce the burden of parking and reduce the amount of impervious in some of these places. In either case, how that applies to what our original application or our original thought of an application was, effectively helps us to eliminate the need to add parking that we feel is essentially unnecessary for this use. And then in the event that, very similarly to what happened at the Raymore and Flanagan, where they eliminated a portion of their business and then Wooden Tap took it over. Well, now all of a sudden they took over X number of square feet. There's this much parking on the site. Clearly there's no need to add more parking, even though that restaurant use is in there. But in the event that, for example, that happened and there was if somebody came in and it was a brand new site and they only put in 50 parking spaces and left a bunch of green space, then they eliminate half of their use and turn it into a restaurant, need to add more parking. We just feel it'd be more adequate that when they come in for that change of use and to do that, and they would have to then provide a site plan to show that additional parking, rather than building it all now and it potentially never getting used. So what we basically are coming before you today is to try to just get your opinion on the best route of action, and 2, what your thoughts are on kind of the numbers that we had originally proposed. So it would matter of whether or not we continue to look at retail as a whole, and do we kind of reduce some of those numbers, or for now, do we just focus on the furniture showroom and sales, or the indoor showroom, however the verbiage that we come up with to define it, and the definition we come up with for it, or do we do both and go from there? So really just more or less want to get your opinion and your thoughts on it as we move forward.
Thank you. Any questions from the commissioners? Commissioner Droz?
I'm actually going to start. Well, first of all, I just want to say I love the idea of, it's a big parking lot.
Yeah.
And if we could actually do something with that, that'd be great. Before I get to that though, Mr. Dixon, let's assume we do a text amendment. What does that do for the town into the future? Is this just for that property, or are we talking whole town?
Any text amendment to the parking regs would be the entire town.
Okay,
It depends on how narrowly that text amendment is defined. I
Right.
kind of gave two options going forward. And there is a third option that we can discuss as well, which is deferral of parking, which they've actually showed a lot of the elements of anyway, on here. But it's to consider if we do something for showrooms, it'll affect every similar showroom depending on how we define it. I don't really like in zoning regulations saying just furniture showroom. There are similar showrooms out there, Ren Kitchens, for example. When you have kitchen and building showrooms, they require very little parking. A lot of it is by appointment. A lot of it is, personal customer interaction. There isn't as much need. So if we were looking at showrooms, this would enable those that are underparked, or should I say overparked right now, that if there is additional room and that they downsize, they could utilize the existing parking lots they have. And like this, not necessarily QSR, but in like Wooden Tap example, a restaurant moved in and could use that large parking field. They just happen to have a lot of parking in that parking field over there. But there are other circumstances where you could see where this would apply. It would also apply to if you had another space where you had one that was a lot lower requirement, a showroom wants to move in, it doesn't make someone completely cover the area with impervious surface. So as I said, it will, depending on how narrowly it's defined, and if the commission wants to go down the text amendment route to just consider these uses that, these don't require the same level of parking. I kind of looked through, kind of getting a little ahead, but I looked through some regulations in towns around Connecticut. Couldn't find much for specific showroom. I found EV showroom of all things, and that's like 2 cars per 1,000 square foot, which is very similar to what they're talking about here. I did find there have been some municipalities who are starting to lower their requirements. Just because I happen to look there because I worked there before and I know that they just updated their regulations in 2023. Went through a large process. Groton, for example, I looked at their retail requirements. Their retail are 4 per 1,000. If it's up to a 10,000, 10,000 to 40,000 is 2.9, and above 40,000 is 2.5. So they've cut it ultimately in half for the large uses. So there is a trend towards less parking now. It's really the commission which way you would like to go with it. There is the option for a deferral. It's up to 25%. And that's something with the amount of evidence that's been produced in this report. I think this is probably the most comprehensive application I've seen for someone to really say, hey, we want to reduce parking and here's why for our specific use. So it's really which way you want to go. If it's narrowly focused on showrooms, it's just going to affect showrooms.
so what does, again, assuming we do a text amendment, that could potentially how we limit it, it's still gonna affect the whole town. Now to you guys, thank you very much, sir. My worry, and obviously it's a back and forth discussion, my worry is you're talking about the use of a 40,000 square foot building, and it's pretty much only going to be a furniture store or something along those lines. To an extent, I agree, but not completely.
Mhm.
A Walmart's going to be 110, 117,000, similar to a Target, a Depot, a Lowe's, your big box stores. But that negates something like an Amazon Fresh, something like a hometown Walmart, which is going to be less than 50,000 square feet. So the concern then becomes, does it make it where you can only have a furniture store in there? Because obviously times change. 15 years ago, nobody thought that a bookstore would be delivering stuff to everyone's house.
Yep.
Amazon didn't exist 15 years ago. You know what I mean? And obviously because of that, your retail numbers are dropping. So what I would hate to see is twofold. One, you guys make yourself a white elephant because now you can't use the building for anything else. Let's say Ashley does amazing and wants to move into a 100,000 square foot building. You're left with the white elephant. And then as the town, have we set ourselves up and backed ourselves into a wall? So those would be kind of the two concerns is not, and again, I want to start out by saying, I love the fact that you're trying to do something with a massive parking lot. Yay, it helps everyone. You know what I mean? I just hate to see a lose-lose out of it. 5 years from now, 3 years from now, 10 years from now. You know what I mean? That'd be my only concern.
Yeah, and that was one of our major concerns as well. Obviously, the property value right? If you can only use that property as a furniture showroom, reduces the value of the property substantially in consideration to being able to use it for anything at all. And again, that's why but to be honest, we're looking at this and saying that, we believe that state of Connecticut is coming out, has produced all of these recommendations and requirements for, what we should be doing as far as impervious surface. It would be my guess that as the state continues to push this forward, especially with like the MS4 requirements and everything else, that the town is going to probably have to look at things like these retail numbers and stuff at some point and say, okay, how many, gigantic, asphalt parking lot fields do we have that are totally empty? What should we do? And especially as I think more the thought process is that no one's going to sit here and tell Home Depot, okay, listen, you have too much parking. You have to go rip it all out. That's not going to happen. But I think it would be probably in everyone's best interest that as we look at this, and again, it's not something that this text change or application needs to address, but in the future, the next 3 to 5 years, that should probably be looked at so that if a, site that maybe doesn't have anything on it right now that somebody wants to come in and develop, we're not just saying, okay, well, you have to have the 5 parking spaces because that's a requirement and it hasn't been changed yet. So, let's build the gigantic parking lot anyway. Because that unfortunately is basically what happens. I mean, that's the reality. If I need 5 parking spaces per 1,000 square feet and I want to put up a 100,000 square foot building, I'm going to put in the parking spaces because most likely if I'm the developer, I also don't want to go through this process of the whole text change and of dealing with all that and all of the, legal fees and or, other fees that are associated with it. So, our thought process is that while this may be a little ahead of the curve per se to start saying we believe the parking is going to be reduced, we feel as though with the trend that's moving forward and with the way that things are moving forward, it's probably something that as we look to the near distant future, those parking regulations, I would assume, would probably be investigated and maybe looked at a little more thoroughly. And I mean, and that's obviously your purview. So you guys could tell me, nope, you're crazy. We're never changing them. But, that was another discussion that we had. And I believe that it was, the way it was referred to us was that it's been something that has been talked about in the past. It's just never actually gotten to a stage to move forward. So.
Also, Commissioner Hoffman.
Yeah, I think we're talking about a building that right now is furniture. It's not a big place right now. Take a look at Jordan's down in New Haven. And they've got a massive amount of people coming in and out. And that wouldn't work here because there's not enough space for somebody like that. So if somebody of that nature wanted to come in, they take a look at it and say, with that restaurant there, I don't have enough parking for what I see as a typical day of parking for my facility. So they probably wouldn't do it. So you're looking at, I think, smaller companies coming in to look at a space like this and cutting back on the parking, could be a detriment to them. Has any amount of parking been checked out as how much parking is used on a daily basis at this spot? Do you have any idea?
Yes. So, and Mr. Evanasser can go through this a little more thoroughly than probably I can, but the Placer data, Placer AI data that we provided for the Ashley store, that system is used, it basically uses cell phone data to track, because everybody tracks everything we do, where people are going. So this location, using that data, has found found that in a 1 year period, there were a total of 29,400 people who visited the store. It then breaks this stuff down basically to the day. And so we looked at the busiest day that they had. And we also looked at and used the actual physical counter over the door that counts the number of people walking in. And I believe it's in one of these summaries, get to it. What we found was that it also tracks the average length of stay that people actually physically stay in the store. And so what we did was we took the peak hour of the peak day. So again, that was Black Friday. And then we took the peak hour of Black Friday, and we assumed that even though most people going in there are probably two at a time, you know, you have a couple or two partners going in and maybe a kid or two who has who came in, because this is using the tracker data actually on the door. And we said that 50% of those were just going to be single people actually driving one car, and the other 50% would be people coming together in one car. And then we also added a safety factor for overlap. So people are there for an average of 46 minutes. So if we said, okay, well, let's assume that in that peak hour, they stayed and new people came in and there was this big overlap of extra people, the total number that we came up with was 25.2. So 25 with all of the safety factors applied and average and everything. So on the busiest day that they have actually physically had, because this is using physical data that was actually gathered, there were 25.2 cars assumed in that parking lot. And then again, if we assume that they also had 12 employees working that day, for example, we can assume that there would be approximately 40 cars. Maybe somebody even left a car in the parking lot overnight and when they weren't supposed to, there'd be 40 cars in that parking lot. So utilizing kind of all this data, and we went through and we did this for using the Placer AI data for Bob's, for Raymore and Flanagan, for Bassett Furniture. We did it for all of those stores and started accounting for and taking into account all of those parking lots and looking at that data. And what we found is that the minimum was like 2.37, or sorry, the maximum was about 2.37 cars per 1,000 square feet for this type of a use. The minimum was actually less than 1 per 1,000. And so averaging all of that out, it averaged out to 1 car per 1,000 square feet. So that's the data and the numbers that we've come up with. That also tracks and correlates with the numbers from the trip generation manual, from the parking generation manual, most of which had them at less than the average at less than 1 car per 1,000 square feet, with the peak instance at 2 point something. So we have looked at that. I also think, and again, if we were to look at this kind of globally from a showroom perspective, anybody who has a showroom currently in town, as you mentioned, that could apply this, currently has parking lot with 5 cars per 1,000 square feet of area. So if we then take this and assume and say, okay, well, we're going to drop this number down to what we think is something more appropriate, including all of our safety factors, including all this stuff, you know, let's call it 2 spaces per 1,000 square feet. And then 5 years from now, somebody comes in and takes over 20,000 square feet of that building. Well, now there's most likely still a large portion of that parking lot, because they didn't go again. They probably didn't go and start ripping it out. There's a large portion of that parking lot that could be utilized for another use, whether it be even a convenience store or a personal service shop or something else that's allowed in this zone. And I think that that's another possible potential use that could be applied to this as well. If, you know, you had, and again, the more part of a global look at retail and saying, well, you know, Wren Kitchens, for example, is utilizing this space all of a sudden. Now that reduces their parking load. Half of their building goes away. They don't need it anymore. They don't use it. And somebody else comes in who really needs 3 to 4 parking spaces per 1,000 square feet. Well, now that you've averaged those two things out, the parking lot is still probably large enough, if not still oversized. And so that's just our thought process and where we're
So
going.
looking at the plan that you have here, it appears that you feel you would have enough space.
Oh, more than enough.
Yeah.
And that not even including, and again, to your point, something like a Jordan's Furniture wanted to go into a facility. I think the Jordan's Furniture in New Haven is over 100,000 square feet of space. Then they have that whole kids thing and whatever facility in it. So I would be hard pressed to, if that came and was trying to utilize this regulation, I think that, you know, as a commission and as a planner, I would probably sit there and say, well, you know, I don't know that you can really sit here and say that all 100,000 square feet of that is just furniture showroom if you also have this entertainment center space that takes up 20-something thousand square feet of space in your building. So again, that's a very, very specialized, you know, use, even more specialized than just furniture showroom. Now we're integrating a bunch of different things into the same building. But again, I think that on a site plan to site plan basis, that's something that could just be looked at and say, okay, well, the same way we do with any kind of mixed use space, here's the square footage of furniture showroom, here's the square footage of this type of retail commercial use, here's the parking requirements for those. And again, on this site, for example, you know, we are utilizing we still have a significant number of parking spaces in the front portion, and there is area in the back of the building to add more spaces. So if this text amendment were to go through and we were to utilize just the 2 parking spaces per 1,000 or whatever the number that is decided on is, we wouldn't need to build that parking lot in the back. 5 years from now, somebody comes in, they want to put another retail, they need 30 more parking spaces. Well, at that point in time, whether we decide, hey, you know, maybe we can try to defer some of these, or we build 30 parking spaces in the back of the building so that you aren't kind of locked into now a white elephant type of facility. And I think even, for example, the Raymore and Flanagan building. So that's got an absolute sea of parking in the front of it. They've got a parking on the side of it. There's also a huge amount of asphalt in the back of it where they actually do their loading and delivery. Well, if half of that store was no longer utilized as a furniture store, it's a good guess that some of that area in the back could then probably be restriped for additional parking if it was actually necessary. But again, in that instance, I don't think that it would probably be, because I don't think you're going to get many uses coming into a space like that that need quite as much parking as this even has.
Rob, you all set?
Thank you.
Commissioner Minor has their hand raised for a
I'm
little
sorry?
bit. Commissioner Minor has their hand raised for online for a little bit.
Okay. Commissioner Minor?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'm in agreement with both commissioners that have already spoke. I think there is a need at this point to reconsider our parking counts. Spending almost 30 years in commercial shopping center maintenance, we have seen a trend towards larger national retail big boxes shrinking inside to their requirements and changing their distribution network to just-in-time delivery. So I think retail as a whole is being reshaped, and I'm glad that Paul brought up the Groton case scenario, because I think those are probably valid numbers to take another look at. Specific to this site, I think that there is adequate consideration to putting an out parcel building in for additional use at some point, as well as continuing to operate the showroom as it is, or if it were to go into another retail setting. I'd be a little less inclined to pigeon-toe this to just showrooms. I think we should also consider retail as a whole, because we do have some big boxes currently that are in the process of vacating or have become recently vacant, that I think those centers are going to have to be reimagined in order to stay relevant, because we're just not seeing, or I can say I'm not seeing statewide big boxes coming in as much as we're seeing going out. So that would be my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Minor. Commissioner Pascarelli,
I don't have any comments.
Commissioner Woods.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, I think our count ball is probably high. There is definitely a drop in parking. We've reduced our numbers at residential parking for larger complexes, and it's worked without any issues at all. And I'm sure the owner of this would like to see every space filled on a daily basis. I drive by your establishment 3 to 4 times a day. And you have 1, 2, 3, maybe 5 cars. And it's, you're no different than any other furniture stores. I drive by on the Berlin Turnpike. And this particular site, I'm very comfortable with, because if you do now require more parking, because you've rented out half the space and that's gonna need more, you've got that space in the back where you're gonna have 30 spots. But I think, I'm not comfortable with the deferral, because I don't think the deferral gets it low enough. The deferral only gives us 25% reduction. I'm more comfortable with, dropping it down to 2 to 2.5 cars per 1,000 square feet. And all, like Lowe's, that's our biggest box. Is that considered a showroom? I wouldn't consider a showroom. Just a retail.
For Lowe's, straight retail,
Straight
even
retail.
garden center, everything. I would actually say we might not even have counted the garden center, because it's kind of a separate type of thing that has less, but yes, the entire building, gross floor area.
And the kitchen showroom?
Yep, yeah, it's all rent. Yeah, it's all
Rent.
retail right now. Yep.
But so, and again, that is, but it's a showroom.
Yep.
Right? They don't sell furniture per se, but they sell kitchen cabinets. It's,
Yeah, and anecdotally, just driving by it and being around that area, the multiple times I've been on that site, there's rarely cars, like 2 or 3 is
it's all
what
like,
you'll see.
if you walk in there without an appointment, you're just gonna have to turn around and walk back out. Chances of you seeing somebody and speaking with somebody is slim. They book everything. So.
I'd like to just.
Thank you.
Business owners.
Excuse
We
me,
don't want more than
name
five
it.
cars. Sorry.
Name and address, please.
Sammy Abonasra, the owner of the 56 Costello Road. Just wanted to add that as a business owner, we don't want more than 5 cars. Actually, we don't spend more money on advertising if we have 5 cars or 6 cars on an hour, because that's how we staff the showroom, because we want to serve every customer in there.
And again, we just ended up buying a couch. You're in typically for at least an hour to 2 hours, depending on, well, you buy one, a stock couch that's comes, you're not making any changes, but now if you're changing the fabric, changing this is all crap I learned in the last week with my wife. Why are you bringing it? I don't want to do this, but there's different cushion thicknesses, different types of cushions. My God, I go, just buy what you want, but it's time, right? So again,
So, sorry.
I would like to see, I'd love to see the retail restaurant in there. I think that's an excellent use. And if you've got, obviously with the apartments and the new complex across the street, you probably have a good opportunity to secure a tenant. I think it's an excellent use for the property. I really do. And one thing that we do, we go out and eat. Right? As a public, that's what we do. And that will spill over and maybe get them to walk into your shop. So it's good, I think, for both of us.
I just want to add that we do have a tenant who signed a commitment and waiting for this. This is why we approached. Back in 2000, the average customer right now spends 39 minutes in our store. That was an hour and a half about 10 years ago.
My wife's not average of what you're telling me.
Okay. Well, it's just the 95% of our customers would have spent at least 2.5 hours online before they come to our stores. So that's the trend right now. And
So they're doing a lot of it before they get to you.
yes, she comes in to feel it.
Yeah.
She already probably made her mind up
That's
of
right.
what she wants.
Okay. So that's where I am, yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I have one thing. I definitely think that we need to reconfigure our numbers on the parking. You are aware of the fact that they may close that Costello Road crossover, right?
I was told by the Department of Transportation that the island opening to make a left is not under consideration for closure, but the left turn is already.
Yeah, but they put a monopolite curbing, so it's Costello Road's right in, right out. Am I correct, Paul?
Yes.
Yes. So just as long as you're aware of that. I don't know what the, I can't remember, Paul was gonna look and see what the department was going to do with regard to the flex beam, if they were gonna take that crossover out, which means your customers would have to go down to Payne Road and make the turn. I don't know what the final decision on that is, just make you aware of it. You
Okay.
did speak to DOT and they said they're not gonna take it out?
Because, you know, we had the left turn that was canceled and I wasn't notified, so I spoke to DOT and they said that it's just because of the traffic light. Now we can
But,
make a
But I'm-
U-turn.
okay, but you do realize if you make that left turn, you cannot go into Costello Road. Because there's a curve, there's an island in the middle there now.
I think he's talking the left on the Berlin Turnpike, take it right on the Berlin Turnpike, go up to the new light for 3333.
And then turn around, right, but the one that's in front of Costello Road is still open.
Yeah,
Yes.
the southbound left turn is
Yes.
still, it's still permitted. It's the turning out from Costello, trying to turn left into the southbound lane across is now signed in that now. I have seen a car squeak around it. That does happen sometimes with right in, right out type of scenarios. They did expand the beam slightly when I was out there, potentially not all the way across, but they did put in the measures that OSTA approved. I have not received OSTA's final approval of the whole setup there, but obviously they let, you know, the 3333 utilize the light and okayed it and uncovered it. So, you know, we haven't received the paperwork for it. But yeah, it was that right in, right out control on the island for the northbound lane.
Oh, Costello
And
Road.
then a slight extension of the flex beam that they put in.
I just want to make you aware of it, that's all. You know, I'd like to see the utilized in front also, so. Anything else, Paul?
Yep, so the one thing I would say, it sounds like, so for the applicant, you've gotten good, I think, feedback regarding, at least for the furniture store, with some concerns regarding reducing overall, and this is kind of a special case in this scenario, but going forward, if one was developed out smaller. I don't see many furniture stores being developed out at this point as a newer use. You know, it's not something, and actually the applicant can correct me because he's in the industry more than I am.
Yeah.
But I haven't really seen an expansion of that industry. We see kitchen showrooms, we see things like that that kind of move around. But it sounds like, so just a direction for them of whether you want them to move forward with the narrowly focused one for the furniture, or whether we want to look at our whole parking one. It's a different level of burden on the review, but while we're at it is the question.
Commissioner Woods?
So Paul, my question to you is, do we want to do the text amendment on our own, or we want the applicant to propose a text amendment to us?
Yeah, so that's as a matter of staff timing, it's a simple one. They pretty much have it written. I would say the applicant would propose it and put in the application. If it's a larger, it could take a little longer. I think more research is due on, like, if you do the entire retail, because we really do need to look and have, you know, an analysis of, okay, what's this gonna do to Walmart's parking lots? How many spaces would it move down on it? Look at aerials. I wish I had the Placer AI. It's an interesting software. I've actually talked with them. You know, it's an extra $20,000 line item for a piece of software, and you have to get good with it and using it. But it's not
We could use their login.
But that is something, you know, that analysis of looking at the town, that's something I don't think has really been done. And most towns don't, you know, it is a larger things to do. But again, when I'm seeing newer zoning regulations that have been done, you know, I use Groton for an example. Full disclosure, of course, I did work there previously. They have 6 planners and they spent, I think it was between 150 and 200 something thousand dollars to rewrite their zoning regulations. So they just went through all that and invested in it. And this is what it's yielding out at the current market. And it's very similar when we're talking about, these are all big box or mixed commercial. It's very similar retail environment for the same uses that we kind of have.
So I think we would look back to you. If you want this to move along faster, propose the text amendment, fill out an application, and back in front of us.
Okay.
Yep, and so on that note, do we think, I think for example, to move this along faster just for the applicant and for the potential tenant that wants to look at this and just obviously is anxious to know whether or not, you know, this can move forward, and obviously there's timelines involved with that. Would you feel comfortable if we submitted a text amendment for the line item of showroom first? And then the applicant could come and also submit a later date for retail overall, obviously to protect the interest of the property value. But that would also then not hold up potentially the tenant opportunity that's presented.
Paul, what do you think?
Yep, I think, you know, the narrowly focused is faster. The larger look at the town is something that I think is a little more deliberate. It is the trends though. This is what we've seen.
Right.
Again, most of Connecticut municipalities won't move into the, you know, large city of things they're doing right now with eliminating parking minimums and just saying, hey, market, you figure it out. Because while these are minimums, there's nothing that stops an owner of saying, actually, no, my style of store does need more parking, so I'm going to install it. It's on, you know, there's some responsibility for business owners to know what their needs are going to be when they develop out a site and say, okay, I need this much parking based upon X amount of stores that I've had before and what I built out.
Sure.
And this could very easily be if we do reduce the overall retail and we kind of pull showrooms into it, or we decide whether that's not needed anymore and it covers a mixture of uses, that's a discussion to have, or it could be pulled right out again while we're looking at parking as a whole. But I think it kind of solves an immediate need of the applicants.
Again,
You know, and to
My
that
advice would
point,
be to showroom.
yeah, and to that point, we have seen, at least our office, generally speaking, most applicants know what they need for parking. Very rarely do we have an applicant say, oh, no, I want less parking than I need. It doesn't happen, especially like restaurants and stuff like that. You know, we've had multiple cases where restaurant, you know, owners and operators come and the requirement is 100 spaces and they're like, 100 space, I need 150 spaces. Because the reality is that, you know, they know if the parking lot looks full, people aren't stopping.
That math is easy to do.
You know, and so, you know, if the burden does fall largely on, and again, like you said, this is minimum parking requirements. There is no maximum proposed. So even furniture showroom, if somebody wants to come in and build a furniture showroom and say, well, you know what, but I don't know if I'm going to need 50,000 square feet in 10 years. So you know what, I want to build it out with 4 parking spaces per 1,000 or 3 parking spaces per 1,000, whatever it may be. You know, that's their opportunity. Again, we feel as though, as to your point, instead of deferring them, if we don't require them up front and then an expansion occurs or somebody changes, it's just another opportunity.
Yep, so Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Minor had his hand raised.
Commissioner Minor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I would be in agreement that I think for the discussion currently is to consider it on a narrow focus. But I think Paul, as he described, we really need to look at our retail because retail is without question being reimagined, and we're going to have to try to stay relevant to that with our stock that we currently have and try to maximize what we currently have available. So I would agree with that.
Okay.
All set? All right. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay. Next, going to old business. No stuff, Paul?
Yep.
Okay, old business, pre-application discussion for 77 Payne Road signage. Please state your name and address for the record, please.
So, my name is Gary Dayharsh. I live at 31 Library Lane in Old Lyme. I'm here representing the SBS Realty, which owns 77 Payne Road in Newington. And I've been the builder of that project, so we're here.
Can you just talk, lower the mic so you
Yeah.
can hear, please? Thank you.
That better? Okay, thank you. So if you're familiar with the building that we've recently put up there,
Right.
it actually sits perpendicular to Payne Road. The narrow side, 66-foot depth, faces Payne Road. The 175-foot long side faces the parking lot. There are no public entrances on the Payne Road side of the building. They all face the parking lot. So we're looking for some guidance or determination from you how to handle that, because 66 square feet of signage, which would be allowed based on the frontage towards Payne Road, is really not adequate for our needs. Where the 175 square foot that faces the parking lot would be more than adequate for our needs. So the regulations are written that they say it's 1 square foot per lineal foot of frontage on the public street with the public entrance. But again, we don't have the public entrance there. So if it was one store facing Payne Road with an entrance towards Payne Road, it probably would be okay, but that's not what we have here. We have multiple businesses in this building, and each one requires its own signage, as well as a pylon sign. So we're really here asking, how should we handle this with you? I guess Mr. Dixon has indicated you might have the ability to interpret the regulations that the frontage is actually the front of our building, which happens to be perpendicular to the street, or we may have to come in and do a text amendment or get a variance to do what we need to do. So we're here to ask you for guidance. The drawings that you see up there are the signage that we're proposing right now. So that's what you would, if you were to allow it, that happens to be about 126 square feet of signage, including the pylon sign, what you're seeing up there now.
Commissioner Woods.
Again, this is simple for me. The front of the building is the main entrance of the building. You know, I'm sure the reason they built it is turning the building the other way just didn't work with the lot that you have. I know it's a long, narrow, deep lot,
Yes.
but that's clearly the front of the building. And the part that faces Fan Road is clearly the side of the building. Your main entrance is on front of the building, which is right off the parking lot. So I don't have any issue with it at all. I would consider that the front of the building. That would be my interpretation. But you need a few more votes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Commissioner Jones.
I agree with Commissioner Woods completely.
Okay. Commissioner Hoffman.
Same as here.
Commissioner Pascarelli.
Yeah, that's fine.
Commissioner Minor.
Yeah, I'm in agreement also. I think a good comparison would be on the opposing side of that S-turn, I believe is a very similar setup where the sign store is, and there's a few other businesses. Predominantly, their signage is on the west side of the building, which would not be their frontage either. So I would say that's a very consistent with this.
Okay. All right, thank you. I also am in agreement.
You okay with it? Paul?
Yep, yeah, so it's, so I kind of wrote in the staff report, and this is really based upon kind of history in Newington too, and this is talking, unfortunately Eric is not with us tonight because he, he's on vacation. But based upon past interpretation, there has been concerns. You've had property owners who have entrances on both sides who are trying to count this and count that, and that's why it has been very strict in the past on how the interpretation has been. This is a unique circumstance, as in there's no door on the front of it. And, no one really wants to go in and revise the entire sign regulations because we know that ends up being one heck of a process. I've never really seen something more contentious than actually doing full-blown sign regulations. It shouldn't be so contentious, but it becomes an issue with community character questions. Newington, on some cases, is really on the lower side of what signage is permitted with the 1 square foot. If you're on the Berlin Turnpike, where he's not far from, you actually get 2 square feet. And if you have a side, you get 1 square foot. And if you have a rear that has an entrance to it, which of course you wouldn't see the signage anyway, you get 0.75.
You know, if you're on a
So-
corner lot, you get front
Yeah,
and side.
so there's a lot of scenarios where the Berlin Turnpike, just because typically the 35-foot required setback, nothing can be put in there, the buildings are set back, the sign just has been looked at larger. I get that, how it looked at. I don't think there's an issue with making the interpretation, there's no door on it. If we are looking at the sign regulations, I would probably look for some type of clarification. Just, my only concern is going forward, again, this is clear that the TPZ says, yep, there's no door on that one. There's no planned door on that. It's not going to be used in that way. But that there would be some guardrail kind of put in. And this is, when we get to the regulations, which is on my radar, but there's a tremendous amount of things that keep popping up as far as projects. But that we look at something like this, of putting a guardrail in to consider it and, saying that, okay, yes, if we do consider that no signage can be put on the side, there are unintended consequences of looking at it. You have a very large, say, we have a maximum size, luckily, of our freestanding side, but you have a very large building, it's a manufacturing building, and they get to completely max out their signage. They count the side of it, oh, we only have a door over there, we don't have it on the front, but we're gonna try to put it on the front, and they could just end up with over signage based on that. That's your, think of worst scenario. The worst scenario is you'd have one large manufacturing or commercial building with attempting to do over signage on one side, and then staff saying, no, that's not the interpretation of the TPZ. It's when you're in a situation where your only entrance is on the side, and that's counted as the front, and that's the front, because we've typically allowed signage to be split. So yeah, my only concern is if it's your concern, if that, okay, you count this and then you wrap it around the side, and allow someone to get more signage than someone else, and someone coming in and saying, well, you allowed them to do it and not me. So that's the only potential issue I could see arising in the future. We can put the guardrails in now, we can put it in later. Again, it seems like the interpretation of the TPZ, kind of as I wrote in the staff report, is, you are the zoning commission. This is wearing the zoning hat for the interpretation of the regulations. So if that's the way you interpret it, because, why would they say, it's interesting the way it's written, with the front door on it, the side of the building. So it has a little contemplation in it already of skewed buildings. I think it was written with a little bit of flexibility, but it was the rigid interpretation in the past that we've stuck with, because that's been our interpretation.
Okay.
So, in the 10 years I was on previous to this, we've gone through those signing regulations at least three or four times. Steve can correct me, maybe even more.
I bet it was painful every time.
Before I even got on this body, I was on a committee that went on forever.
Right. One other thing, Paul, on the agenda, you have 77 instead of 67. Sorry.
Okay, that is interesting that followed through on that. Luckily, it is a pre-application.
Well, I'm just letting you know.
Luckily, there's no action items, but I will talk with staff about that too.
Okay. So we're all set with this, we're all in agreement? Okay.
So just for clarification, is the next step a sign permit or is
Yes.
it okay, great.
Yep. And Eric will be back on Monday. I would say, give him a day or two to catch up with a week's worth of, I don't know, probably about 30 complaints.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank
Good
you.
luck.
Good luck. Are you open yet?
We are.
Okay, great.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yes, a nice spot and a lot of children are learning to swim.
Good.
Oh, I think you had, it's over, oh, you unraised his hand. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Your person was on, but I think it's all taken care of.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, have a good night.
You too, thank you.
Next is petitions for public hearings, scheduled, Paul.
Yep, so we advertise this, butter letters go out tomorrow, and it'll be in the newspaper tomorrow as well. For just, it's a sign, this is the Pike. So, right on Payne Road there, this is the sign for the apartment building, for the Pike. Freestanding sign.
All right, thank you. Town planners report, Paul, current land usage.
Yep, so current land use is always put on there just as a reminder for people that they can look on there. It not only includes TPZ, but it includes Conservation Commission, it includes those as well. So the people who are following along can use these links in our agenda to link to other items and just see those out there. Those should be the most recent up-to-date drawings that are available. We're still working on shifting that over to actually using the computer system, the view permit to go through that. But that is just out there for people. And what I will share as far as the next item, which is my personal report, is that not as much going around and inspecting sites, with Eric being out answering a lot of zoning questions and trying to make sure he doesn't have too much on his plate when he gets back. But what we have is, just to let you know, we did meet with Colliers, who came down. That's the consultant for the Town Center Economic Development Master Plan. That we walked Town Center, we walked the Hartford Healthcare property. And they're in data gathering now, but this is that first boots on the ground with staff and town manager and the project team to kind of walk through and understand the spaces. There's a lot of good discussion regarding the parking lot too, and the good things that have been done, but certain areas that kind of lack connection, that lack kind of cohesiveness, and the for lack of a better word, kludgy entrances, the signage, that trying to get as part of this plan, getting the consultant and getting the community to think about how this space works and how visitors, because all of us understand here's where you go and here's where you go out, because we've done it a lot of times. Someone visiting Newington, it's a little confusing, and it's not necessarily as well signed. Google might get them there well, but for those looking around, I think there's some improvements that could be done. Looking at some spaces that could be developed out and just understanding, the town center. So that's still underway. We hope to have a kickoff meeting sometime soon. But again, right now we are still in data gathering and putting together the complete public outreach package. We will be at the Waterfall Festival with the consultant as our initial first pop-up, reaching out to people. Hope to have, as we're developing it now, at least a quick straw poll question, a couple questions for people to start getting them engaged, to have people sign up. The website, we're working on it. There'll be a website up for this where people can sign up with their emails to get updates. My plan for this project really is not only to, have typical outreach meetings like we have the charrette, but also when there's specific elements of the plan, say, the economic study, is to go to EDC and to the economic development and bring it to them and use that forum, not only to talk to the commissioners, but more public comment can be taken on because it is an information session. So that's kind of how I'm planning on utilizing our existing framework that we have on top of the charrettes, on top of the pop-up events, to really get people's input and try to get them engaged in the process.
Thank you, Paul. Communications, everybody has the CROG letters. Is there any questions on those? Okay. Public participation, second round. Anybody wishing to speak from the public?
No one online with their hand raised.
Okay. Go to marks for commissioners. Yes, Commissioner Droz.
Just a quick question. With the exorbitant amount of discussion publicly about the pool project, is there a point in time that comes in front of us?
It will, once it's either passed, if it's passed by the referendum, it'll come before us, not before.
So referendum, then us.
Right.
Yep.
That's why I was curious. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, because in 824, when it's just for the appropriation of the money and not for the project itself. So, when the project is developed, when this is the proposal, this is exactly what's getting built, that comes before us, before final council action on that decision. Yep, we're going forward with this. So that will be when it comes forward with an 824 referral.
Yeah, just at 8-24 though.
Yeah,
Not really.
just an 824, correct.
Yeah.
Yep, because the town of Newington zoning regulations, that is what's required.
We
just
don't
an
actually
824.
vote to approve what they're doing.
Right, it's to make sure it goes
Yeah.
with the
Just
2020.
2030, yeah.
Exactly.
Yep.
That's what I was curious about, is when that happens within a process. Gotcha. Appreciate it.
All set?
Thank you.
Commissioner Hoffman? Mr. Pasquarelli? Mr. Woods?
No, so-
Commissioner Minor?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you. My remarks are, I'm going to be having knee surgery, so I'm going to be gone for the next two meetings. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you.